Welcome to Teach, Learn, Share, a podcast that thoughtfully explores teaching and learning practices in higher ed. I'm Margot Eckenberg.
And I'm Jasmine Perrin. This podcast is brought to you by Teaching and Learning Services at McGill University. We're recording today from Montreal, Quebec, on unceded land, which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange among Indigenous peoples, including the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe nations. We honor their stewardship as we live and work on these lands.
Today, Jasmine and I are back in pursuit of learning more about current ideas about engagement and learning on our campus today. So a few months ago, we spoke to Kai Gutteridge and Lavinia Travassos, two undergraduate students at McGill, to hear about what being engaged in learning means to them. If you haven't already, be sure to check out that conversation. Today, we're seeking insights on student engagement from an instructor, and we're curious to know whether her ideas on what it means to be engaged in class matches up with those of the students. Low class attendance rates are something instructors have been dealing with for a really long time. But the effect of the pandemic and general student attitudes towards attending class seem to have shifted in ways that go beyond what was previously considered normal. So today we wanted to speak with an instructor who's thinking about ways to entice students back into the classroom that go beyond telling students that they should be there, that it's important to be there, or deducting marks for not coming to class. Stay tuned to hear us chat about some of the connections between what happens in class and students learning, learn about some in-class techniques to get students focused on the material while they're in class, and also some ideas about peer-to-peer interaction in class that can help encourage students to attend class. And as a final note, I did want to say that there is some research, and we'll be sure to link to the articles in the transcript of this episode, that show that being in class can actually improve student success. So much so, in fact, that one study has shown that class attendance is a better indicator of higher grades than any other indicator of academic performance. It's a pretty surprising piece of news, or at least it was when I read it for the first time.
Thanks, Margot. I hear everything that you're saying about the changes that we've been going through as a society and as a higher ed community. And I really feel for students and instructors who are trying to navigate this post-pandemic technology-driven world where the effort to get everybody together in a physical space and making that experience meaningful requires so much more effort than it did before, and for both parties. And I don't want to take up too much time because I'm looking forward to introducing our guests, but I do want to add a thought on the student episode on engagement and learning. What stood out for me particularly was the diversity in how students are defining and experiencing engagement. Both students in that episode shared how technology has supported their autonomous learning experience and is also the source of persistent distraction. And what's really clear for me is that being engaged is far more than just showing up. It's about how the learning experience resonates with student goals, motivations, and how it can be meaningful for them beyond the classroom. I'm really excited for today's conversation because it's an opportunity to see the other side of the coin. How do instructors view engagement, and what strategies are they using to get their students engaged? Do they share the same ideas as students about what it looks like, especially in this post-pandemic context? And perhaps, how do instructors create environments that inspire students not just to attend class, but truly connect with others and with the learning process?
Let's meet our guest without further ado so we can see if we can get some help to answer some of those questions.
Today, we've invited Dr. Mette Bendixen to the show. Welcome, Mette. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, what and where you teach, and maybe any other projects or activities that you've been involved in or that you are currently involved in that you might want to share.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jasmine and Margot, for this invitation to speak in this podcast. I'm excited about this. So I'm a professor in the geography department at McGill. I am trained as a physical geographer, and I have my PhD degree from Copenhagen in Denmark. So I'm not a native English speaker, something I am proud of, and I don't mind saying to my students as well. In fact, I actually like to ask my students in the classroom how many of them do not have English as their first language. So I teach a few different courses at McGill. I know we're going to talk more about that a little further on, but some of the things I'm really excited about also is the opportunity to chair McGill's Senate Subcommittee on Women, which I've done for a few years now, to help increase gender equality across not just staff and faculty, but also across students here at McGill.
Thanks so much, Mette. And I will say that we did meet. You came to McGill like right in the middle of the pandemic, and we met a few times, getting started with technology and how to use that in the classroom. So I'm really excited to hear how you've, taken those those strategies and ran with them. Without further ado, we will get into the first question. Could you describe your engagement strategy or an engagement strategy that you give to your students? And please let our listeners know just a little bit about the context of the course you're going to be talking about. So subject, class size, maybe the year of study of students, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So as I said, I teach a few different classes. I think the one that's most relevant for this conversation today is my 200 level class, which is called Earth's Changing Surface. It's a class with 100 students. And I taught my first class in this semester just Tuesday. And I asked how many of the students are coming from geography. And I had a few handfuls. And I asked how many of you are not from even the Faculty of Science. And it was a vast majority of the class. And it's everything from sports, education, political science, and geography and earth science students. So it's a broad mix of students in this specific class here. I think because of students coming with a different background, with a different level and interest in the course, I think that's fair to say, it's really important for me to get the students engaged as early on as possible. So one of the very first things I do in the class is to ask students to pinpoint on a map. And here I use the learning technology Mural, which I think is the easiest way to describe it is an online platform, basically an online whiteboard that everyone can access during the class. And as the geographer I am, and it is a geography class, I post this world map and I ask students to pin on this map places they connect to, not necessarily where they're from, but just where they connect to. The point of this exercise really is for students to see that students in this class come from all over. It's also, the course is called Earth's Changing Surface. So in the class, we are literally investigating landforms and landscapes across the world. So it's an opportunity for students to better connect to the material in the very first lecture. That's one example of how I use Mural. I also simply ask the students if they're comfortable to turn to their neighbor, introduce themselves with their pronouns if they're comfortable saying those, and just introduce themselves. Because I ask how many of you don't know anyone in this class, and a lot of students don't know anyone. Again, we had our second lecture today, and I asked them to do the same thing again. If you're comfortable, turn to your neighbor, introduce yourself. So basically making the students have some sort of connection and not feel as lonely as I know a lot of the students do, especially also pre-pandemic.
So just to be clear, you're in a live in-person classroom and you use the technology. Do you have it presented on the board, and are they accessing it through their laptops? How exactly do you implement the strategy?
Yeah, so I post on my courses a note or an announcement saying that we're going to use Mural. The students should sign up and they should remember to bring a laptop. And I also note that it does work on a tablet or a phone, but it's easier to use on a laptop. So a vast majority do have laptops in class. And then I post the link on my courses so that the students during the lecture can go and click that link. And then I broadcast it on the screen for all to see.
I think I should probably, for our listeners, just explain a little bit more of what Mural is exactly, not to be confused with Miro. Mural is MURAL. It's a digital whiteboard or a digital collaboration space where students can use to brainstorm, to share visually or collaborate visually. They can post Post-its, they can post images, icons, and so on. And they can interact with each other by liking each other's posts or making comments. So it's a really, really neat tool and can be used really in so many different types of activities, icebreakers being one of them. So I just wanted to make sure that our listeners were a little bit familiar with what we're talking about in terms of the tech.
Thank you for that, Jasmine. And I think it's one of the things that I appreciate about it too. It really can become quite a colorful palette where the students can have an opportunity to put a little bit of themselves into these posts that they make. They can change the font color, the size, even the content of the mural.
And maybe you mentioned it. How many students are in your class?
Yeah, sorry. I have 100 students in the class. So it's actually quite a lot. And this mural gets quite busy. And I think that's part of the fun in it too. The students can really see, oh, everyone is really contributing to this. Let me do that as well.
I love the idea. I wanted to ask you, Mette, because I I love the idea that you do both. Both options are there, the in-person turn to your neighbor, but then also using the learning technology as another space to collaborate. And I was interested too, the in-person face-to-face is obviously like very direct human contact, but Mural can also be used anonymously or students can identify. And I was wondering what your preference was for your students, or if there's a way that you know who's doing what, or if you keep track of that. And I'm curious too about this. I mean, both are forms of engaging your students, but they're quite different. And I don't know, I was just a little curious about sort of if students feel more comfortable in person or identifying themselves and sort of creating that sense of community, even in a large class of 100 people. Or there's something nice about being anonymous on this big whiteboard where you can write more freely. So if you could just tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, thanks, Margaret, for that. And what Mural also offers is the opportunity for the students to be anonymous or not. So I was mentioning how it really gets busy when you have 100 students logging into this online platform. I, as the instructor, have the opportunity to hide all the participants so that the students cannot see each other's names, which can be nice because I also ask, like one thing I do as just an exercise, I do that a few times throughout the class, just asking, how are you doing? How are the students doing? And the students know that I, as the instructor, can see their posts. And one of the reasons for that is that these Mural activities serve as in-class activities. So I have designed the course so that I have 7 in-class activities in which the student should participate in 6 of these. So by me being able to see who posted what, the students can get their mark for these activities. But another thing about it I like, in this example of asking how the students are doing, I had a few years back, I had a few students writing in these post-its that they actually were really not feeling well. And a lot of students are anxious and stressed about the midterms, and they write that. They're really open about that. But I had a few that were a little more concerning. So that offered me the opportunity to reach out to the students and ask if they needed help and guide them to student wellness hubs and other resources here at McGill. So I think it serves different purposes, whether you want it to be anonymous or not.
Absolutely. That makes all the sense in the world. And I love that there's also some unexpected benefits to integrating the learning technology and just this engagement technique that you really want students focusing on the material, but you're also connecting with them, even in a large classroom, to the degree you can in a more personal way, and giving them a space where they can a little bit more freely, perhaps also let you know how they're doing, which is just so important.
So I think this really offers students an opportunity to see that they're not alone, and others are also anxious about midterm, or also felt like the break wasn't as restful as they had wished it be, or that they missed their friends back home, or some of these things. And I think, like to your question, Margot, on how much students actually disclose, and if they disclose more being anonymous, I do actually think that they do, and I do think that they appreciate having this outlet.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about how you use Mural as well in terms of course content. So, for example, would you use it to make sure students are understanding a lecture properly? Or is there perhaps material that you've asked them to prepare at home, readings that they're doing, and then they'll bring in questions and put that up on the Mural during class time? Or is it like a reflection moment in the middle of the lecture? Can you give us a sense of when you use it for those reasons as well?
Yeah, I use them in a variety of ways. So again, this is a course called Earth's Changing Surface. And one of the things we talk about are coasts. So what I start off is asking the students in the beginning of class, what do you think of when you think of a coast? And the students have a few moments to go on the internet and post pictures. And some obviously post funny pictures from a beach, and others actually post something from back home in BC or whatever kind of coast it is. But it really just shows that coasts are a variety of things, right? And then later on in this class, after I have taught a fairly complex landform that's called beach ridges, so these elongated ridges you find at the beach, I ask the students, I give them instructions, and I ask them to go to Google Earth to identify, in a certain region, identify these beach ridges. This is a region where I know that naturally these ridges formed quite abundantly. And then the students find what they think is a beach ridge plain, take a snapshot or a screenshot of this, and then post it back on Mural. And after class, it gives me an opportunity to check, have they actually understood what a beach ridge is? Because some things near the coast look like a beach ridge plain, but it's actually not. So I sort of group them afterwards and give them a little check mark, all of these pictures that the students now have posted to see like, yes, this is a beach ridge plain. Yes, this is another beach ridge plain. It might look different from this one, but it is still the same land form. And then there are obviously also students that get it wrong. And it gives me an opportunity to then teach. Well, it gives me an opportunity to talk about why this is not a beach ridge and why I would understand that this looks like a beach ridge plain, but in fact, it is something completely different. So that's a really nice way for the students to see just how different this specific landform is and what it could look like, but what it's actually not.
I love that because it also allows students to track their own learning. But I was also thinking about this notion of students learning from one another, because I would think that there is quite a bit of peer-to-peer learning on a platform like Mural. But I'm guessing that your categories help because 100 images might be a little bit overwhelming for a student, even if they wanted to learn from the other images. There might be too many. So if you could tell us a little bit about how you think your students also learn from themselves by engaging with the strategy.
Yeah, as you're saying, like being able to organize it, and again, it's very visually pleasing. It's quite easy to organize. So in that sense, yes, it's busy during the lecture, but afterwards, I have an opportunity to reorganize so that the students can better navigate and have a better overview of what was actually posted. Your question, Margot, actually reminded me of when I use Mural in my 500 level class, which is a completely different beast because I've had less than 10 students over the past few years. And we basically use Mural as this joint online notebook because with only like 8, 9 students, it's easier for the students to post longer answers and it's easier for students to get an overview of what's out there. So just to say that peer-to-peer learning can be done through Mural, even in small class sizes and also in large class sizes is my experience.
Great. That's really helpful. And for our listeners too, we will be sure to post a few images to what Mural looks like in Mette's classes on the transcript. So watch out for those.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, like backing up a moment at the broader activity, maybe some of the logistics of that activity. So you said you have 7 throughout the course of the term. They're all synchronous in class. How do you go about tracking that and grading that? Is there an export that comes from Mural where you kind of match to the student names? And you also mentioned you do best 6 out of 7, correct?
I have 7 in-class assignments, and they're not all in Mural. I believe I have 2 or 3 quizzes on my courses as well, which automatically then is transferred to the gradebook. So that's fairly easy. This is where Mural becomes a little more tricky because how do you track who has actually posted during the in-class activity? And this is also where I have to add a disclaimer because people can in fact be at home and click the link and add something onto the Mural while not being in class. And I think it's one of those things as instructors we struggle with a lot. I mean, we can't really bulletproof everything in terms of tracking student participation and whether students are cheating or not. But I've found that generally students appreciate these in-class activities. They like that break from me just lecturing. I find that they do come to class. In terms of how to track who participated, I've been fortunate to work with Teamsters, which is the Tomlinson Engagement Award for mentoring. So it's students who have taken the course in the past and have done well, who are sort of mini TAs. They're not grading, so they're not TAs, but they have some tasks that they help out with in the class. And one of them is to track whose name appears on the activity report. So basically who has offered their inputs to the Mural.
So we'll move on to the last question. I was wondering if you were to be speaking to an instructor who wanted to implement something similar, what advice would you give them for a strategy like this one?
Another thing that I think is really important is that you allow yourself time to play around with it because it is a little bit of a steep learning curve with Mural. It offers nice opportunity to make the Mural look really good and inspiring for the students, but there are also quite a few opportunities. So you want to make sure that you feel comfortable using Mural before you hand it over into a big class and everything starts getting really busy when you have the students log onto it. Do you feel like you're done? Send the link to a colleague or a family member or a friend and have them test out if it works for them. Then don't necessarily feel like you need to do a lot, because it'll be empty in the beginning. It'll be a whiteboard in the beginning, but once students start populating it, that's when the fun really starts happening, and the students can make it colorful and start seeing each other's responses.
Yeah, I hear that. And I think another good idea, which I feel you spoke about in terms of that learning curve and students, getting on board with Mural, is having an activity at the very beginning of the term that is like that's no stakes. Just asking them, I don't know if you use that as a graded activity, the world map, but just having them log in, get acquainted with the tool.
Exactly, Jasmine. I do that in my first lecture. So we have 2 exercises in the first lecture. That's not an in-class activity, and that doesn't count towards their final grade, but simply to get them comfortable with it. And quite frankly, also me, I was the one who forgot to lock the world map. So when asking the students to pin them to the world map, they started moving the map around and everything got busy. But we laughed it off, and I remembered for the next one I made to lock it properly.
I'm curious, do you give instructions about how to use Mural, or do you have those on my courses, or do you have them watch a tutorial, or you just sort of let them loose on it?
So as you said, Margie, you are sharing some examples of how I use Mural, and in there you can see, I believe it's on the upper right corner, I have posted some instructions which very specifically outlines how the students first should click this icon, and then this will appear, and then they should remember to lock it. So basically breaking it down to them in the Mural, how to use it. And then most students are pretty tech savvy, so they find it out really quickly.
Well, thank you so much for sharing this strategy. I really love Mural as a tool to be used in synchronous engagement. It's so visual and it can be used in so many different ways. So I appreciate you sharing with us a few of those ways. And every time I see the Mural boards that you've shared with me, some of your templates, and then some of the ones that the students have filled out, it's always really exciting to see how much students are engaging with it, and some of their responses, as you said, are quite special. So thank you so much, Mette. I'm really happy to have had you here on the episode with us today.
Thank you very much for having me. I hope that it came across that I'm also a big Mural fan, and that's very much thanks to TLS. So thank you both, Jasmine and Margot, for having me today.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And please remember to subscribe to Teach, Learn, Share, and let others know about it. Until next time.